In the depths of African heritage, where the drums of ancestral wisdom once guided kings and kingdoms, lies a troubling reality. The monarchy, once the bedrock of culture, identity, and spiritual integrity, is losing its sacred fire. Thrones that once stood as symbols of wisdom and custodianship are now tainted by vanity, greed, and allegiance to temporal power. The sacred stools that once connected the living to the ancestors now groan under the weight of human feelings. Africa's monarchy, a system once built on moral authority, has been dragged into the swamp of modern corruption and cultural disconnect. There was a time when a king was more than a title. He was the living embodiment of his people's soul. His word was law, not because he wielded a sword, but because he was the guardian of truth. But today, many of these crowns have become decorations, worn not with honor, but with arrogance and hubris. Too many monarchs have traded the spirit of service for the comfort of status. They now move more among politicians than others, seeking relevance in places that diminish their authority. When the crown becomes heavier than the conscience, the king ceases to lead and begins to rule.
Strength of Africa TV presents
Thrones without honor, crowns without soul. When the king forgets the people, the kingdom loses control. Thrones without honor, gold without truth. When the stool is sold for vanity, the future loses wings. Call the drums of the ancestors, let the lost ones hear. A crown is not a treasure, it's a burden we must bear.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Depending on where you are at this moment, I'm your host, Adebayo Oladokun, and this is Strength of Africa TV, where truth meets courage, where the past is reawakened and the future of the motherland is reclaimed. Today's episode is titled Thrones Without Honor, the Unmasking of Africa's Fallen Monarchs. Let's start. African monarchy was never about dominion. It was about balance, a delicate balance between power and purpose, between earthly duty and spiritual connection. But today, that balance is broken. Many thrones have become tools of political manipulation, serving as endorsement machines for those who seek to buy legitimacy with traditional titles. The stool that was once sacred is now auctioned to the highest bidder, and the spirit of the land cries in silence. When sacred things are sold, spirits withdraw and leave empty rituals behind. In various parts of Africa, the role of the monarch has been reduced to ceremonial fame. Kings are invited to launch projects they did not inspire, to bless foundations they did not build, and to dance in celebrations they did not understand. Some sit on thrones built by colonial structures, preserving borders and systems that enslaved their own people. Others have turned their palaces into political stages, where money speaks louder than wisdom. There are instances where kings have been publicly accused of abuses, of land misappropriation, of selling honorary titles to those who mock the very culture they claim to honor. In some regions, the throne has become a business, and the kingdom a marketplace. The ancestral shrines are quiet, but the cash registers sing. When a king becomes a merchant, his crown turns into currency. For example, in the western part of Nigeria, in the Yoruba land to be precise, the tradition was once secret and straightforward. Before a king was installed, consultations and divinations were made with the oracle, Ifa, the divine voice that guided choices beyond human understanding. the names of princes will be submitted, and local gin, schnapps, will be poured in reverence during the rituals. The process was never about favor or position, but about destiny and alignment with the spiritual order. But today, that sacred balance is lost. The process of choosing king has drifted from spiritual guidance to social status. Now, it is not the oracle that speaks, but the location of the candidate that decides. In many cases, you must be living abroad, in the United States or Canada, to be considered worthy. The symbol of wisdom has been replaced by the symbol of wealth. The Ifa that once drank schnapps now tastes NSC or Azu. The oracle no longer speaks in the language of the ancestors, but in the accent of modern excess. In some parts of Nigeria today, the process of choosing a king has degenerated into a form of electioneering, where the supposed princes and heirs to the throne openly share money, clothes, cars, and even houses in order to influence the decisions of the king makers, rather than upholding tradition, character, and lineage. This practice reduces a sacred institution to a contest of wealth and manipulation. As a result, unworthy successors are often installed on the throne. Individuals who lack moral authority and wisdom expected of traditional rulers, and who eventually turn the throne into a mere charade, stripping it of its dignity, respect, and true purpose. This trend undermines the confidence of the people in their traditional institutions and erodes the values that have held communities together for generations. If left unchecked, it risks destroying the cultural heritage and legacy that the monarchy is meant to preserve and protect. My people, as if that's not desecration enough, in some parts of Nigeria, the incumbent kings were either former prisoners who had been jailed for serious offenses in the US or Canada. Some 7 kings are languishing in foreign prisons for fraud and other acts of malfeasance. Yet, their stools remain secret at home. And while some are behind bars abroad, others are at loggerheads over the frivolity of supremacy. I'm more superior than you. We are not equal in rank and file. This is not the African royalty that once stood as a symbol of wisdom, dignity, and moral guidance. This is the tragic degeneration of honor into arrogance and hubris, of leadership into vanity. And so, the divine connection between the throne and the spirit world is being severed by vanity. The oracle is mocked, the process corrupted, and the spiritual foundations of the kingdom weaken. When the oracle is silenced by the noise of modernity, the spirit of the land sleeps. Good enough, the people are not blind. Across Africa, many are beginning to question the relevance of these monarchs. They ask, what's the purpose of a king who cannot speak for his people? What's the worth of a crown that stands silent while injustice reigns? If the monarch cannot defend culture, who then shall guard it? If the custodians turn into the corrupt, who then shall cleanse the land? African monarchy in its true form was a symbol of order, honor, and spiritual responsibility. The king was the link between the earth and the eternal, between the people and their past. His duty was not to be rich, but to be righteous. But today, some monarchs live far above the realities of their people, celebrating luxury while their communities languish in poverty and neglect. When the king eats alone, his people starve twice, first in body, then in faith. My people, in some African nations, the political class has learned how to manipulate traditional institutions. They fund kings, sponsor chiefs, and create titles that serve their interest. In return, some monarchs lose their voice, becoming symbols without substance. The very institutions that once challenged injustice have now become silent partners in oppression. In places where culture once guided society, entertainment now rules. Palaces that once hosted councils of wisdom now host banquets of vanity. The monarch, who should be a moral beacon, has become an influencer, seeking relevance through social media and political connections rather than through character and legacy. When a king seeks validation from the world, he loses respect from his own people. It is imperative to clarify that not all thrones are falling. Across Africa, there are still monarchs who stand as true guardians of culture, refusing to bow to the winds of corruption. This view reminds the continent that the throne is not a prize, but a burden of service, sacrifice, and spiritual responsibility. They understand that to lead is to listen, and to rule is to serve. For example, amidst this decline, there remains a glimmer of what true monarchy should represent. In the kingdom of Eswatini, the monarchy still stands as a symbol of unity, tradition, and cultural guardianship. While imperfect like any human institution, the throne in Eswatini continues to uphold its role as the center of national unity and spiritual continuity. The king is not just a ruler, he is the living link between the people, their ancestors, and their destiny. Such examples remind us that the African monarchy, when rooted in its true purpose, can still be a beacon of dignity and cultural pride in a world losing its moral compass. Although these few voices are being drowned out by the noise of those who have sold their honor. And when honor is sold, trust is lost. When trust is lost, the throne becomes an empty symbol, beautiful to look at but devoid of power. The time has come for Africa to examine its traditional institutions. The monarchy must return to its roots or fade into history as another failed system. The role of a king cannot survive on ceremony alone. It must be fueled by character, culture, and courage. The throne does not make the king makes the throne. The younger generation now questions whether these thrones still represent them. They see kings who luxuriate in modernity, but have forgotten the essence of their office. They see chiefs who speak the language of politicians, but have forgotten the tongue of wisdom. In such times, the gap between the past and the future widens. And in that gap, culture begins to die. When the young cannot look up to the old, the future has no guide. My people, in truth, the monarchs who have lost their way have also lost their mystique. The sacred aura that once surrounded them has been dimmed by worldly excess. The stool that once stood for sacrifice now stands for selfishness. In this era of exposed hypocrisy, the people see through false humility. They recognize that royalty without responsibility is nothing more than costume and title. Africa stands at a crossroads. If its monarchs continue to self-serve over society, the crown will become antiquity, a relic of what was once. But if they return to the foundations of truth, honor, and service, then the monarchy can again become a beacon of unity and identity. When a king remembers that his power is borrowed from the people, he reigns with grace. When he forgets, he rules with shame. Africa's future needs leaders who are rooted in wisdom, not just dressed in tradition. The call is for redemption, not relevance, for humility, not hierarchy. Let the crowns be cleansed, let the stools be restored, let the kings rise again, not as rulers, but as guardians of a heritage too sacred to be sold. For a throne without honor is a kingdom without direction. And a kingdom without direction is a people without soul. I'm your host, Adebayo Oladokun, and this is Strength of Africa TV. If you found value in this conversation, Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Deezer. Watch out for the next episode. You don't want to miss it. Until then, tell your own story, because Africa's future is written in African ink. Stay rooted, stay bold, stay African. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thrones without honor, crowns without soul. When the king forgets the people, the kingdom loses control. Thrones without honor, gold without truth. When the stool is sold for vanity, the future loses wounds. Call the drums of the ancestors, let the lost ones hear. A crown is not a treasure, it's a burden we must bear.